Hello, ChangePoint family, and thank you for joining us for the Commons post-service experience. If you don't know me, my name's Tony Murrow. I'm pastor of digital ministry here at ChangePoint, and my guest this week is one of our missionary partners, Mr. Max Schaafsma. Max, welcome
hello.
to the Commons.
Thank you. It's so good to be here with you guys and be here with ChangePoint in person. It's been great connecting here these last few weeks.
So, if people have been around ChangePoint a long time, Schaafsmas are old friends.
Yeah.
If people are joining us, if they're new, whatever, where do you guys serve? Give me some perspective on what your ministry looks like.
Yeah. So us Schaafsmas have been serving the Lord in Italy for 25 years. It's been super cool to see how ChangePoint was really a key member in getting our family to Italy to serve the Lord full time. And so over the years, we've been coming back, returning, spending time here at ChangePoint, really as our home church, our family church. But what we do is we serve the Lord in Milan, Italy, and we are church planters. We believe that the church is really where God has his people growing and following him. And in Italy, the body of Christ is very small. And so the Lord called my parents, and by virtue of calling my parents, he called our whole family 25 years ago to go to Italy as church planters. And I've grown up there my whole life, but as I graduated from college, I felt the Lord calling me also to go back to Italy. And so I've been serving there full-time as a church planter, as a pastor in our church, Point of Light, and also doing sports ministry, which is awesome. I love it.
So, why Italy? Tell us that story.
Yeah.
Did they just pick it out of a hat? Does it have a nice weather?
You know, sometimes the
Italy?
Lord uses different ways. We didn't pick it out of a hat, which is interesting. Typically, the Lord guides people in different ways.
Yeah.
So
don't
use a hat or don't
That's
use dice.
not-
Maybe some more spiritual
maybe more
influence and Holy Spirit and discernment.
So why'd you pick Italy?
Yeah,
why'd they pick Italy?
It actually goes further back than my family. So basically, my mom's family has Italian descent. So my mom's grandparents immigrated to the States in the early 1900s or 1920s or whatever. And then my grandpa was born. He grew up in New Jersey. And then he met my grandma. They got married. They had kids. But they really felt that the Lord was calling them to full-time ministry. And so they were praying about, okay, where does the Lord want us to go? And they really felt the call to go back to my grandpa's family. They're like, oh my goodness, our land doesn't have the gospel as much as it should. And so my grandparents 40 years ago felt the call, you need to go to Italy. And so my grandparents went to Italy 40 years ago, and they're actually still serving the Lord there, which is super cool. And so my mom moved there when she was 11. So she lived there. Then she went to college. That's where she met my dad. Then they came to Alaska. And as they were trying to figure out where the Lord was calling them, they evaluated a couple different options. But as they were praying, they really felt the Lord just calling them to Italy.
Join mom and dad.
Join mom and dad. I mean, it's some people think it's not great, but strategically it could be awesome, because if you're working with a team that you already know, team that's already doing something good, why would you not want to work with them?
Well, it's wonderful to be able to work with your family if you can
Absolutely.
get along with them, right?
Yeah. That helps,
if you got the
right?
dynamic that you like each other.
Yeah, totally.
That's great. So, actually, that's a neat part of the story. So it's now 3 generations of ministering. And are you in Milan proper, or are you in a suburb?
So we're in a suburb of Milan, but it's interesting. So Milan has downtown is skyscrapers, tall buildings, really close apartment buildings. And then it kind of the city just kind of keeps going. And then there's a lot of cities in Europe have this highway system that's a circle. It just goes around the city. And so our town is, there's the highway, and there's one town where the metro line ends, and our town is the next one over. But it's if you rode your bike, you would feel like you're in the same city all the way downtown.
Right.
So there's not there's an open space.
Area,
right? It's like a metro area. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And so we're right outside, which is pretty nice because we're super close to downtown. We got all amenities that a city would have. And then the town after ours is kind of the beginning of the countryside. And so we kind of have a sweet combination of urban city, all the stuff you need, and fields, and a little bit slower pace of life, which is kind of nice.
So tell me about Punta Luce.
Yeah.
Tell me about your church.
Yeah, Punta Luce.
What's it like doing ministry over there?
Oh, it's great. The Lord has been doing some super exciting stuff there. So Punta Luce was a church that was planted 12 years ago. Super exciting. So that church actually...
Second church that's been planted,
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
So 38 years ago, the church where my grandparents planted, that one's called Point of Worship, so Punta Laude. And 15 years ago, they had bought a new building, the Lord was doing amazing stuff, and the elders, which my dad was on the pastoral and elder team at the time, they all felt the Lord calling them, like, we need to do something more. We need to go outside of our city. We need to reach more for Christ and spread His light more around.
Change pointers are familiar with this line of reasoning.
Oh, exactly.
Okay,
so actually the name of this project was Punta Lode and Beyond, which is like Change Point and Beyond was a thing too, right? Change Point in the Northeast or something like that.
Still a thing.
Absolutely.
We have it written in like 2-foot tall letters.
Okay, there you go. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so they were like, okay, like Michael, why don't you guys start like thinking and leading this like Punta Lode and Beyond opportunity? And so my parents were leading like a couples Bible study, and so that Bible study all kind of like, hey, like let's start praying together. They kind of started a prayer group for like this potential new church, and it was really cool. Like all the people who participated were from the same strategic area, and so as like people were coming, the elders were like, oh, like maybe we should target like this part of the city, and so it was a part of the city where we lived, and 12 years ago, they were like, okay, sweet. Michael, you're going to be the pastor, and we're going to commission, I think there's about like 20 of us, or 20 or 30 people that were commissioned, like, okay, go. We're going to plant this new church. And our church is called Point of Light, which is Punta Luce. And so we started 12 years ago. We started in our home. It was really cool, just meeting, and actually, it was cool. We'd go to different houses every week. We'd be like, okay, we'll do this week, this house, move around stuff, and we were excited. We had this like agreement with a hotel set up to like meet in one of their meeting rooms. We had an inauguration meeting planned. It was going to be super cool. We had like a speaker coming in. But then the hotel actually kind of fell through. The hotel was like, oh, sorry, like we gave it to somebody else. And we were like, well, like why shouldn't we inaugurate our building? And so we inaugurated our church in our home. But then it was kind of amazing because like we were like, oh, so bummed the hotel was going to be perfect. But like a month later, we found this other building which was more perfect. Right, and like obviously,
that's a change point story too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like so many times, like we can be disappointed, like oh shoot, this like looks so good, and then the Lord has something better in store, right? And then I mean, obviously, like sometimes He does and sometimes He doesn't, but God's plan is always better, and so it's like okay, like we'll wait and see what happens, and it turned out to be something great for us, and so we went into this building. We were there for probably 12 years, probably there like 6 or 8 years in that building. But then our church started growing, and we were like, okay, we need to like expand. We need to get a new building. What are we gonna do? So the leadership started thinking about what we're gonna do, and they were like, we gotta grow. We gotta find a different space. We gotta find a building that's more that we can use more and do more ministry in. And so we were looking. It's kind of hard to look around, but eventually the Lord prepared this place for us, and we're like, sweet, this is it. And it was so cool, like. So, I don't know, imagine like Great Harvest Company, right? It's on Benson, right? Mm-hmm. And you're like, okay, it's too small for us. We need to move. And it's like 2 doors down to a bigger building. And so it was perfect because like we loved where we were. There's like a great playground where we're doing a lot of ministry. And we're like, oh man, like we don't want to leave this place. And so we didn't have to. We moved like 2 doors over, tripled our space, and we're still in the same community, and
pushed
it was
the
awesome.
Instruments and the chairs.
Oh, it was so nice. We got up, grabbed our stuff, walked out the door, turned left, walked back, put it down. It was the easiest move we've ever done. So we've been in this building for 5 years now, and it's been great. We really love the building. It's been awesome.
Now, have you been in the building for 5 years, or?
So, I mean, technically yes, but in practice, we were out of it for a while.
You guys have been through some crazy stuff over there.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was a protracted legal battle you were involved in.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if we want to get into all that, but then COVID for you guys.
COVID was crazy.
Not the same as COVID for us.
Absolutely, yeah.
So tell me a little bit what the last 18 months has been like for you guys.
Yeah, so I mean, interestingly enough, like when I got back to the field, right? So I graduated college, like commissioned by Change Point.
Where did you go to college?
I went to college in Chicago. It's called Wheaton College.
Okay.
And so after that, I spent the summer visiting churches, building support. Change Point commissioned me. It was super exciting, really cool to have the church like okay, we're excited about what the Lord is doing with you in Milan. Got to Milan, and that was in the middle of our court case, right? And so we were kind of floundering, okay, where are we meeting and whatnot. And then eventually we got temporary rights to meet in our building, in November. And then in February, COVID hit, right? So the first year back there, a lot of stuff going on. And so COVID was super intense in Italy. We went the States went into lockdown, but Italy really went into lockdown. Like we were closed. It was interesting. Like the first thing they closed was schools, and like what do kids do when there's no school?
Run around.
Run around and go to the park, right? And so we were super excited too. I was like, oh, like because like I do a lot of stuff with like sports and whatnot, and they were all canceled, and so like I had a lot of like more time to do other things, and so that's why my dad and I went to like a playground. We're like, oh, let's go kick a ball, just like to do something, and we went to the playground, and there was like hundreds of kids there, like more than there ever are in the summer, and we were like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. And then sure enough, the week after that, the government was like, actually, like nobody leave your home ever. Like that was like so like 2 weeks from the first case of COVID, we went into like serious lockdown. It was like if you ever leave, you have to wear a mask, but actually don't ever leave. So just stay home. And it really went as kind of like a military zone almost. Like in our town, our neighborhood, our mayor would ride around in like a Land Rover Defender late at night. Has a megaphone and is like, please stay home, nobody leave. This is for the safety of you and your loved ones. Like stay home. And it's like multiple nights during the week they'd drive around. Like cops would go up and down the streets making sure nobody was going around. It was crazy.
Yeah, I don't think Alaskans would have gone.
Oh,
for that.
not at all. I would have not worked here.
Oh man.
But it was interesting because like we were the first country hit, and like it was definitely like it was not political at all, and it was like wow, like this thing is dangerous. Like I remember the first week COVID was going around, and it was like, oh, it's just a flu, like whatever. Like that's kind of like what I thought. But then like a week late, like the second week, like a lot of people started dying, and it was like, whoa, like this is a serious deal. And so like all of Italy was like kind of scared for like a lot of time, and so everybody just stayed home.
The whole world was scared for.
Oh,
a while
absolutely,
there,
yeah.
So what did it do to ministry though? I mean,
So totally like transformed everything, right? So it was like such a bummer the timing it worked out because we had a team come in of students from a Bible school, and they were going to be with us 10 days, and we had a ton of super fun stuff planned, a ton of great ministry opportunities. So they came in on Friday, and that was also the first COVID case in Milan happened. And so we were like, oh, okay. I mean, like nobody really knew what COVID was at that time. And so we're like, okay, there's COVID at like 25 minutes from our house, like whatever. And so we had like our young adults meeting that we had planned with them. Super cool. There was like 60 of us. We did some great stuff. Like no social distancing was involved. Like sharing plates, like blowing games, like ping pong. It's like it was very close contact, you know. And then we were like, all right, sweet. So then the next morning we went to church, my grandparents' church, and because our church meets in the evening. So we would take, we'll go see the grandparents' church at 1 in the morning. And then like that morning, like that in the afternoon, the government said like, okay, no churches and no schools. And so we were like, oh shoot, like this team's here. Like we can't, so like all of a sudden, like we have to call everybody in church. We're like, okay, don't come to church tonight, we're closed. But we had this team, it was gonna be so cool because we were gonna go like into schools, we were gonna teach English and religion in like public school. And it was awesome. We had like prepared like a history or Bible trivia, which led into like a little lesson about the Bible and preaching the gospel. And it was like gonna be so sweet. It was just like telling the gospel to the kids in middle school. But that got canceled like all of a sudden.
No schools, yeah.
And no schools. It was actually super interesting. We made a really fun video of like so we turned the Bible trivia into a video to then like give it to the school. And so I was doing a bunch of video editing stuff, like working super hard, got it all done. It was like one of my proudest like videos I made. I was like, this is legit. And then something happened and I accidentally deleted it. I was so bummed. I was like, guys, I'm so sorry. I put so many hours into this beautiful video and
it's happened to
that was sad. But anyways, and so we like in a week we had to figure out, okay, what are we gonna do? But the first time, so they closed church on Sunday, right? So Sunday night we're like, okay, like I guess nothing's happening tonight. And then the next week, a couple of us went to church and like we recorded a service. But then the week after that was like nobody go anywhere. So like all of a sudden we're like, okay, sweet, like what do? We have to figure everything out. And so it was definitely like a learning curve. We kind of worked slowly into developing some different ideas and how to do our services. It was actually super helpful to talk with you guys about like ways that we cooperate, ways of being creative, how to go online and do more stuff.
Happy to help.
But yeah, it was great. But little by little, we kind of got better at things as it started going. So there's a couple of us who preach in our church. So my dad does most of the preaching, and then I do quite a bit, and there's a couple other guys. But we couldn't go anywhere. So I had to teach them, okay, this is how you record yourself. This is how you're going to log on to our YouTube account to upload it to YouTube. And then we'd make, I had another friend who was telling me like, oh yeah, for our youth group we make YouTube playlists. And I was like, oh, like perfect. So I make YouTube playlists with like Italian worship songs like recorded or whatever.
Absolutely, yeah.
But then like as we were talking with people, they were like, oh man, like we really miss being like, worshiping with our church or whatever. And so like part of the worship team is our family. Like we're all, my mom and I both play instruments, and my siblings, like we sing, and we had all been locked down together. And so we're like, well, I guess we'll just make some music. And so we recorded like a couple songs, and we created, I think we had like 15 songs recorded. And then we could have, so we had like a worship sets, right? We could like mix it up, different playlists every week and stuff like that. And so that was, I guess like, it was pretty good. Like nothing fancy, but it was like what worship is about, right? It's like, how do we like worship the Lord with our music, with our words, and with our heart? And that's like what we said, like, hey, like we have an iPhone, we're putting this together on an iPhone, but we're looking at the heart of it, what it is, right? We want you to worship at home. So it doesn't matter what it looks like. We're just, everybody do what you can.
So are you guys back together now?
So yeah, so it was actually really interesting. So like the government kind of is like, sometimes it's really favorable, sometimes it's kind of against religion. But we have in favor that Italy is very Catholic. And I don't know how much you know about Catholicism, but for Catholics, like communion, they need to go to church. Like literally, they cannot be Catholic and not at church. And so pretty early on, like it's probably the end of May, the Catholic Church was like, got an agreement with the government, like whatever red zone or whatever color zone we are, you can go to church for Mass. And so other religious groups were like, oh, like, what about us?
Can we get in on that?
And so, absolutely. And so they hopped on the bandwagon, and like evangelicals also got the right to do necessary church service. And so I think it was like June 5th, we had our first in-person church service. Social distance, temperatures, registries, like all this stuff.
We
like,
know the drill.
So yeah, exactly. But so we started meeting, and it was great. Like we picked up again, then summer stuff started lighting up, which is nice. And then as fall came up, we're like, okay, sweet, COVID's kind of gone. We're going to start preparing the ministry year, get a bunch of things lined up, super exciting. But then in October, like COVID came back, and the government was like, okay, we're all going to red zone, like close everything again, nobody leave your home. But they didn't like change the agreement with the Catholic Church. And so we were like, well, like we're allowed to do church, so why wouldn't we? And it was cool because like, so my dad's like the senior pastor and the elder, and he like felt pretty convicted about, oh, we should keep meeting. But the whole church community was like, absolutely, we're getting together. Like the law closed us a while ago, and the law is letting us meet, so we're not gonna not use the law. And so like the church was like, we need to meet. So that was super encouraging to like have people be so passionate about that. But what was really interesting though was a lot of churches. So the way like our church building is set up, like it's like a square. It's kind of an unusual building. I don't think I would have ever designed a church like that, but now I would. It's like a perfect shape. Like we do all kinds of things in it. It's like, yeah, like something about it. It kind of is. And something about it is just like perfect for everything. Like we can get all the seats lined up. We can do like dinners with tables. Like we have this one ministry we call is like after school with Elena, because it's one of the moms. And her kid goes to school, and they're Christian, and they bring all their friends to church. We just move all the chairs and just play anything in the building. And so it was really cool to use it. It's like cool that space works for that too. But so we had been meeting in like November, like, okay, we're gonna keep meeting. But because of our number and our space, we could distance and all be there and have extra seats. Whereas like a lot of buildings, like for example, our grandparents' church, if they like social distance, they like reduce to like 20% of their like capacity, right? And so like a lot of churches were like either like they did shifts for meeting, or they were just like, it's like not worth it. Because like in a building like this room here, you might have like
4 people.
Well, you could only have 4 people, but
Right.
a church might have 30, right? And so it's like, oh man, like 4 people times divided by 30 is like super long. And
a lot
so
of services.
a lot of services, yeah, I mean, too many. But so a lot of churches in the winter just like weren't meeting, just because of, and then they closed again, right? In November, like I was saying, October, like I was saying earlier, and so like, oh, it's closed, we're not supposed to meet. Whereas like we thought, we like looked at the law and we're like, no, we can meet.
We have a box.
We have a box, so we're going to do it. But what was really cool, though, was that during the winter, our church kind of became a church to anybody who wanted to go to church. And so, like, some people from other churches were like, oh, I really miss being in person. And, like, we were chatting with them on WhatsApp or whatever. And we'd be like, well, like, if you want, you can come to our church. Like, well, because you have to have a letter to go to church, actually, that said, like, I am a member of this church, and I am going to church at this time. So that if the cops pulled you over, you could, like, be like, eh. And they would, yeah, one time actually happened to somebody in our church. They were leaving, and they got pulled over. And the cops were like, oh, we didn't even know there was a church there. But they let them go because they were doing what they were allowed to do. And so it was really cool kind of how the Lord used our church being open to encourage other churches, which was really neat because we had people from other churches like would come, and it was like we were very clear with people like, oh yeah, come to our church until your church meets. And it was neat to be able to serve other people in that way. And it's like a really encouraging time. So a lot of things kind of like were slow in the winter or the fall and the winter. But eventually, I think it was like in January, there was like a week where things got better and then things got worse again. So we're still in red zone. But like a couple of different leaders in our church were like, you know what, like we've been meeting fine. We've been social distancing. No cops have said anything. Nobody's got sick. Like, let's do some more. And so our women's Bible study started meeting. We used to meet at my parents' house. And they used to have like breakfast and tea together and read the word, which is a really cool ministry. But they're like, okay, like I guess we'll just do it in church and not have tea or breakfast. But they just want to keep studying the Bible together. And so they started doing that in church every week. That was really cool. And then our young adults ministry, we were like just kind of like sitting talking one day and we're like, yeah, like let's get together. Like, why are we doing this? And so in February, we just started meeting again. We would meet once a month. It was like, so I'm like our youth and young adults pastor in our church. And one of the things that I wanted to do for organizing this, because like a lot of times when you do ministry, like you want to have people involved, right? You want to like serving the Lord as having people be part of what the church is doing. Yep. Kind of like we had a couple weeks ago, Dave Steerwalt, came on stage. Like you can come on the court too, And so like in the fall, we had a lot of different opportunities for people to get involved. But what I kind of had a vision for with the fall or with the young adults ministry was like, I just want it to be something like refreshing for anybody who comes. And so I was like, I'll just organize everything, make it super simple, so people just show up. Also, because a lot of people in our church, there's a couple people in our church who serve in everything, right? And
Pretty
so I was
common,
like, I was like, oh, I don't want to overwork people, right? I want people just to like come and enjoy it. So we made it really simple. It was like just worship night. And it was actually really cool because since no other churches were meeting, no other concerts were happening, we had like connected with some like Christian artists, started becoming friends with them. And I was like, hey, like, do you want to lead worship at a young adults meeting? Like, we'll give you a letter and you can come. And they're like, oh yeah, sweet. And so it's actually pretty cool. Like, we got some like legit Italian Christian artists to lead worship at our church. But it was like awesome. Like I told them like, hey, like we're doing this. It's like super casual. Like we just want to worship the Lord together. Like, do you want to come? And they're like, oh yeah, sweet. Like we had one guy come from Florence, like 3 hours away. And he was like super pumped. We were like, hey, like here's your piano. Like I'll play the drums with you if you want. Like super easy. But it was like really like a sweet time. Like every day, once a month, and like looking around, like I was like, okay, like thank you for coming. Everybody just would be smiling at the end, and it was like really cool reminder of like how important fellowship is, and even how important it is like to worship the Lord in person, right? I mean, I'm sure a lot of you know it. It's like I worship Change Point online a lot before COVID even, because I was like, oh, like I can't be there, but I can still watch online. But there really is like a true difference about being in person. There is. And so we really loved like, wow, like we just like sit and worship. There's like no agenda really. Like I'd share a devotional thought. There's something that the Lord was putting in my heart. But it was just like being together, worshiping the Lord. And so that was like a really cool ministry that kind of like developed out of COVID, right? Like in the year before that, I had like less time to do that. We kind of did different things for young adults. Just because of like other stuff was going on in our church or with the handball ministry. But we decided like, hey, like let's do this year. The Lord opened an opportunity for it. We'll do it. And it was great. And so that was something I really enjoyed in this last year from COVID and from ministry. It was something super cool for me.
Well, Max, it's always great to catch up with you. We're short of time. Where can Change Point family members, if they're interested in keeping up with you and Punta Luce and ministry, finding out more, where can they go online to find out
absolutely. More? So I'm on social media. So I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. you can type Max Schaafsma. That's SCHAAFSMA.
We can throw the graphics up on the screen.
Oh, sweet. So like,
Oh yeah, we got
Max
we got
Schaafsma
you.
right here.
See, take a look. There it is. There you go.
Perfect. Or you can send me an email. So, which is also right here.
Yep, there
I
we
don't know
go.
if I did it right
Max
enough,
Schaafsma.
but
Look at that, that's perfect.
So there you go, mxschaaf@gmail.com. Created that address when I was in middle school. Why change?
Still rocking it?
Still rocking
You know
it.
what?
So
I
all
admire
my
your
emails are there.
perseverance.
So yeah, so you send me an email, and if you send me an email, I'll actually add you to my prayer list. And so probably like once a quarter, I send out like newsletters where I kind of update people like what's going on in Italy, what's the church going, and how you can be praying for me. And so part of that comes through email. And so if you would like to receive those, send me an email and say, hey, I heard you on the Commons. I would like to be in your newsletter, and I'll make it happen.
Piece of cake.
So yeah, super easy.
Max, thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, it's been super fun. Glad to be here.
And thank you, ChangePoint family, for joining us. God bless you. Have a great week. We'll see you next Sunday.
Bye.